Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Jung's most powerful insight challenges everything we think about self-determination. If you believe you're in control of your life choices, this documentary might disturb you in the most necessary way. We'll reveal how your shadow, the disowned parts of yourself, silently shapes your relationships, career decisions, and sense of purpose. Through intimate portraits of 5 individuals confronting their shadows, you'll witness the profound transformation that happens when people face what they've spent a lifetime avoiding. This isn't about self-improvement. It's about self-reclamation on the path to discovering why you're really here. The Shadow Revealed, Jung's revolutionary discovery. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast, unexplored forest within yourself, a place you've sensed but never dared to enter. This is your shadow, not merely a psychological concept, but the living reality of everything you've denied in yourself. Carl Jung's journey to discovering the shadow wasn't merely academic. It emerged from what he called his confrontation with the unconscious, a profound psychological crisis that began around 1913 after his painful break with Freud. During this period, Jung experienced disturbing visions and thoughts that threatened to overwhelm him. Rather than suppressing these experiences, he made the courageous decision to engage with them directly. He would sit at his desk each day, intentionally allowing his conscious mind to sink into the unconscious, recording the fantasies and images that emerged. This personal descent into his own psyche became the foundation for many of his most revolutionary ideas. Jung realized that what he encountered wasn't simply chaotic madness, but meaningful content with its own intelligence and purpose. From this crisis emerged his understanding of the shadow, born not from detached observation, but from direct, often frightening personal experience. What made Jung's vision so revolutionary was how it fundamentally challenged the prevailing psychological frameworks of his time. While Freud viewed the unconscious primarily as a repository of repressed sexual and aggressive impulses, Jung recognized something far more profound. He proposed that our greatest strengths and potential often lie hidden within what we fear most about ourselves, a radical inversion that shocked the psychological establishment. The shadow, as Jung defined it, contains far more than our darker impulses. It's the complete repository of disowned aspects of personality, everything we've rejected from our conscious identity. This includes not only our negative traits like anger, selfishness, or weakness, but also positive qualities we've been afraid to claim: creativity, power, sensitivity, or brilliance. Think about the person who views themselves as always nice, but has buried their capacity for healthy assertion, or the intellectual who has disowned their emotional depth. Jung's shadow concept fundamentally differed from Freud's notion of the id. While Freud saw these unconscious impulses primarily as primitive drives requiring control, Jung viewed the shadow as essential to our wholeness. For Jung, the shadow wasn't simply something to be managed or suppressed, but integrated, an essential element in the journey toward what he called individuation, the process of becoming one's complete self. Consider the story of Maya, the artist featured in our documentary. For years, she struggled with creative blocks, unable to understand why her once abundant inspiration had vanished. Her paintings became increasingly controlled and lifeless. Through shadow work, she discovered how deeply she'd internalized her father's criticism of her messy and impractical artistic tendencies as a child. To gain his approval, she had unconsciously disowned her spontaneous, playful approach to creativity. The footage of Maya's studio before shadow work reveals a space of meticulous order, canvases with technically precise but emotionally vacant images. The contrast after her shadow integration is striking. Vibrant colors spill across larger canvases, supplies arranged in creative disorder, and paintings pulsing with emotional authenticity. "I realized I wasn't just reclaiming my messiness," she explains. "I was reclaiming my voice." What makes the shadow so crucial to understanding our purpose is that it often contains the very qualities essential to our authentic path. The sensitive child who learns to suppress their emotions may be denying the very empathy that would make them an exceptional therapist. The person who buries their anger might be disconnecting from the passion that would fuel their advocacy for important causes. The shadow's formation. How we become strangers to ourselves. The fear of abandonment runs deeper than the need for authenticity. This profound insight explains why we so readily hide who we truly are, pushing vital aspects of ourselves into the unconscious. What if the most significant relationship you've ever struggled with isn't with another person, but with the parts of yourself you abandoned along the way? Think back to your earliest memories. As children, we arrive in this world as integrated beings, expressing joy through uninhibited laughter, anger through honest tantrums, fear without shame. We exist in a state of psychological wholeness that most adults spend decades trying to recapture. But then something happens. The shadow begins forming the moment we learn that certain parts of ourselves are deemed unacceptable by those whose love and approval we desperately need. This psychological transformation isn't merely theoretical, it's developmentally inevitable. When a sensitive child is repeatedly told to toughen up, when creative expression is dismissed as impractical, when anger is punished while compliance is rewarded, we learn a devastating lesson. Conditional love requires conditional existence. The psychological mathematics becomes brutally simple. To belong, certain parts must be banished. The mechanism behind this fragmentation reveals something profound about human nature. Our need for connection and acceptance is so fundamental that we willingly perform this internal amputation, sacrificing authenticity for attachment. As developmental psychologists have documented, this process begins as early as age 2, when children first recognize the power of parental approval and disapproval. By adolescence, most individuals have constructed elaborate internal walls, separating the acceptable me from the hidden me. Consider James, the business executive featured in our documentary. His father's consistent message, vulnerability is weakness, created a lifelong pattern of emotional disconnection. I built my entire career on never showing uncertainty, James explains, his voice tightening with recognition. I was respected but chronically exhausted, successful but perpetually empty. It took a complete breakdown at 43 to realize I'd been running from myself for decades. What makes this process particularly insidious is that it requires constant psychological maintenance. Neurological research reveals that repression isn't passive. It's an active process demanding significant mental resources. The parts we push away don't simply disappear. They require ongoing energy to keep them contained. This explains the chronic fatigue many experience. They're fighting an internal battle while simultaneously trying to navigate external demands. Cultural and societal expectations vastly complicate this process. While all cultures create shadow material, what gets relegated to the shadow varies dramatically across societies. In highly individualistic cultures, dependency and neediness often become shadow material, while collectivistic societies might push assertiveness and self-prioritization into the unconscious. The consistency isn't in what gets suppressed, but in the universal human tendency towards psychological fragmentation. Modern technology has intensified this fragmentation to unprecedented degrees. Social media platforms don't just reflect our curated selves. They actively encourage and reward increasingly narrow self-presentations. Every perfectly filtered photo, every carefully crafted post further solidifies the division between our authentic nature and our public persona. The algorithms that drive engagement simultaneously drive dissociation, creating deeper disconnection from our complete selves. The psychological toll of this division manifests in surprisingly consistent patterns. Anxiety that signals the energy required to maintain internal barriers, depression reflecting the grief of self-abandonment, and a persistent sense that something essential is missing, because it is. While we might consciously experience these symptoms as mysterious afflictions, they're actually logical outcomes of psychological fragmentation. Shadow projection, seeing yourself in others. This psychological fragmentation doesn't just create internal symptoms, it fundamentally distorts how we see others. What if the people who irritate you most are actually carrying projections of qualities you've banished from your conscious identity? Jung discovered that our shadow doesn't simply disappear when suppressed. Instead, it reappears in our perceptions of others, creating a psychological hall of mirrors where our strongest judgments reveal our deepest denials. Think about someone who consistently triggers an intense emotional reaction in you. Perhaps it's the colleague whose confidence makes you unreasonably angry, or the friend whose neediness inexplicably exhausts you. According to Jung, these powerful reactions often have little to do with the other person and everything to do with you. He called this mechanism projection, the unconscious tendency to see in others what we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. In our documentary, we captured a profound moment with Sarah, a mother of two, who initially came to therapy complaining about her daughter's excessive emotional demands. During a breakthrough session, Sarah suddenly recognized that her irritation stemmed from her own childhood, where expressing emotional needs was forbidden. "I wasn't angry at my daughter," she confessed, tears streaming down her face. "I was angry at the part of myself that still desperately wants that attention, the part I've been denying for 30 years. This projection mechanism operates beyond our personal relationships, shaping social and political landscapes. Consider how easily societies create enemy groups onto which they project their collective shadows. The qualities a culture most vehemently denies in itself often become the very characteristics it attributes to outsiders or opponents. Historical analysis reveals that the most virulent hatred often targets groups who represent disowned aspects of the collective identity. Research by psychologist Robert Johnson illuminates how projection dramatically influences our romantic attractions. We fall in love not simply with others, but with our own projected content, particularly qualities we've disowned. The most powerful romantic attractions, Johnson writes, often occur when we encounter someone who embodies significant aspects of our shadow. This explains why the rational accountant falls for the free-spirited artist, or why the nurturing caretaker is drawn to the self-sufficient loner. Each partner carries projected aspects of the other's disowned self. Common projection patterns reveal themselves in everyday interactions. Notice how people who most vehemently criticize specific traits in others, "He's so arrogant, she's so manipulative," often unconsciously express these same qualities themselves, albeit in different forms. Or consider how we sometimes elevate others to heroic status, idolizing qualities we've suppressed in our own nature. Even our inexplicable irritations, when someone's harmless behavior triggers disproportionate annoyance, typically signal shadow material seeking recognition. Jung provided a practical guideline for identifying projections. Emotional intensity serves as the most reliable indicator. When your reaction to someone seems disproportionate to the situation, whether extreme admiration, irrational irritation, or inexplicable fascination, you're likely encountering your own shadow material. The stronger the emotional charge, the more significant the projection. These projections don't merely distort our perceptions, they actively shape our decisions, relationships, and life paths. Consider how projection influences career choices, pursuing professions that express disowned aspects of ourselves, friendship patterns, surrounding ourselves with people who carry our projections, and even the conflicts we repeatedly engage in, unconsciously arranging situations that bring our shadow material to light. The filmmaker Sophia Johnson captured this dynamic beautifully when interviewing participants for our documentary. We create relationships not with others as they truly are, but with the disowned parts of ourselves they represent to us. Until we reclaim these projections, we remain strangers not just to others, but to ourselves. The purpose, hidden in your pain, emotional triggers as signposts. Beyond recognizing ourselves in others lies an even more transformative discovery. The aspects of your shadow that create your deepest suffering aren't random afflictions, they're precise indicators of your life's work. What if the emotional wounds you've been trying to hide actually contain the seeds of your greatest gift to others? This paradoxical truth represents one of Jung's most revolutionary insights. The very sensitivities that cause us pain can become our most profound sources of purpose when properly integrated. Consider how emotional triggers, those moments when you feel disproportionately affected by something, aren't merely weaknesses to overcome, but signposts pointing toward your authentic contribution. In our documentary, we followed Elena, a high school teacher whose relentless perfectionism created constant anxiety. "I would stay up until 3 a.m. redoing lesson plans," she explained, terrified that any mistake would confirm I was fundamentally inadequate. Through therapy, Elena discovered this perfectionism stemmed from childhood experiences where her worth was tied exclusively to achievement. The breakthrough came not when she eliminated her high standards, but when she recognized them as a wounded part of herself that needed integration. "When I stopped fighting my perfectionism and instead understood its origins, something unexpected happened," Elena shared. "I realized I could help my students navigate their own perfectionism and fear of failure. The very quality that had tormented me became the foundation of my most meaningful work." After integration, Elena developed an innovative teaching approach that helped anxious, high-achieving students transform their relationship with imperfection. Her classroom became a sanctuary for students wrestling with the same demons she had faced. This transformation illustrates what Jung called the wounded healer archetype. He suggested that psychological wounds, when consciously processed, can become sources of profound insight, creativity, and capacity to help others. These wounds aren't merely obstacles, but potential pathways to deeper self-understanding and personal growth. The shadow, when realized, becomes the source of renewal, the productive impulse that established values of the ego cannot provide. This pattern appears repeatedly throughout history. Consider how many remarkable contributions emerge directly from personal suffering. The composer who transforms grief into transcendent music. The advocate whose personal experience of injustice fuels a lifetime of meaningful social change. The writer whose struggles with mental illness provide unprecedented insight into the human condition. In each case, the wound becomes the source of the gift. Research in post-traumatic growth reveals the psychological mechanisms behind this transformation. When we consciously process our wounds, rather than simply enduring or avoiding them, these experiences can generate exceptional levels of empathy, resilience, and wisdom. The psychologist who studies trauma after experiencing it personally often develops uniquely effective therapeutic approaches. Their suffering creates an intuitive understanding that academic knowledge alone cannot provide. What makes this concept so powerful is its universality. We all carry emotional wounds, experiences that shaped our sense of self and safety in the world. These aren't random afflictions, but precise indicators of where your unique sensitivity resides. Your triggers around rejection might reveal your gift for creating belonging. Your struggles with uncertainty could indicate your capacity to guide others through life transitions. Your experience of not being heard might be preparing you to become an exceptional listener. Look at what triggers strong emotional reactions in you. These triggers aren't random, they're psychological compasses pointing toward your authentic purpose. The areas where you feel most vulnerable often indicate precisely where you have the most to offer others. This doesn't mean your purpose is to simply relive your wounds, but rather to transform them into wisdom that serves others facing similar challenges. The question becomes not how to eliminate these sensitivities, but how to integrate them. What if the experiences you've been trying to overcome are actually invitations to your most meaningful work? The path to purpose often leads directly through your shadow, not around it. The hero's descent: methods for shadow integration. The question isn't whether you should integrate your shadow, but how to safely navigate this internal labyrinth without becoming lost in it. Throughout history, from ancient shamanic rituals to modern psychotherapy, humans have developed specific methods for this psychological descent, techniques that transform what seems like a terrifying journey into a path of profound liberation. This descent into our shadow resembles the archetypal hero's journey found in myths across cultures. Think of Orpheus venturing into the underworld, or Theseus navigating the Minotaur's labyrinth. These stories aren't mere entertainment, they're psychological blueprints for the journey we must each undertake within ourselves. The treasures found in these mythic underworlds parallel the wholeness and purpose waiting to be discovered in your own psychological depths. Yet we hesitate at the entrance to this labyrinth, and for good reason. The terror of confronting what we've spent decades avoiding is legitimately frightening. Who will I be if I acknowledge these disowned parts? What if I discover aspects of myself I can't accept? This resistance isn't weakness. It's a natural protective mechanism that requires respect and careful navigation. Jung recognized that shadow integration isn't a one-size-fits-all process. He emphasized that each person's journey requires a uniquely individualized approach with no universally effective technique. However, he outlined 3 essential stages that form the backbone of this work: accepting the shadow's existence, becoming aware of its qualities and intentions, and engaging in a long process of negotiation with these aspects of yourself. In our documentary, we witness Marcus, a graduate student, using active imagination, a technique Jung developed, to dialogue with a part of himself he had disowned since childhood. I visualized my competitiveness as a figure sitting across from me, Marcus explains, and instead of trying to banish it, I asked what it wanted. This conversation revealed that his rejected competitive nature wasn't about dominating others, but about expressing excellence, a revelation that eventually led him to his calling as a coach for underprivileged youth. Psychological safety forms the foundation of effective shadow work. Jung believed that integrating the shadow requires what he called moral effort, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths about oneself. But this can't happen in an environment of self-judgment or criticism. Creating a space of radical self-acceptance allows these disowned parts to emerge without triggering the very defense mechanisms that banished them in the first place. For this reason, professional guidance can be invaluable, particularly from therapists trained in depth psychology or Jungian approaches. The therapist creates a container strong enough to hold whatever emerges, preventing the work from becoming overwhelming or destabilizing. Beyond the therapist's office, regular journaling creates a powerful window into shadow material. Try this approach. When you feel triggered emotionally, write down your reactions without censorship. Then ask, what quality in this person bothers me most? Have I ever expressed this quality? When do I deny having this quality? This reflective process gradually reveals projection patterns and shadow content that might otherwise remain hidden. Mindfulness and meditation practices offer another pathway, helping you become more aware of shadow aspects by encouraging non-judgmental observation of your thoughts and feelings. This creates space between automatic reactions and conscious response, a crucial skill when confronting shadow material. Artistic expression, whether through painting, movement, or music, often accesses shadow content that logical thinking cannot reach. The creative process bypasses intellectual defenses, allowing symbolic representations of shadow material to emerge in forms that feel safer to approach. What connects all these methods is their ability to address a fundamental human longing. That persistent feeling that something essential is missing in your life isn't imagination, it's recognition of fragmentation. Parts of your authentic self remain locked in the shadow, creating an energy-draining division. The incompleteness you feel is real, and it can only be resolved through the patient, courageous work of integration. The alchemical transformation, from shadow to gold. The energy-draining division between your conscious self and shadow isn't just a psychological concept. It's the very phenomenon that captivated Jung's imagination when he encountered medieval alchemy. What appears most toxic or worthless in your psyche might actually contain the raw materials for your greatest transformation. Jung's fascination with alchemy wasn't accidental. In his 1944 work, Psychology and Alchemy, he recognized that those ancient laboratory processes weren't merely failed attempts at literal gold-making, but profound symbolic systems mapping the transformation of the human psyche. The alchemist's obsession with turning lead into gold mirrored exactly what Jung was witnessing in psychological transformation, the conversion of disowned aspects into integrated strengths. Consider what this means for your own journey. That critical inner voice you've been battling, that impulsivity you've tried to suppress, that sensitivity you've labeled as weakness. These base metals of your personality aren't defects to eliminate, but raw materials awaiting transformation. This perspective utterly challenges our conventional approach to self-improvement, which typically focuses on removing unwanted qualities rather than transforming them. In Mysterious Conjunctions, Jung explored the alchemical stages, blackening, whitening, reddening, and yellowing, as symbolic representations of psychological growth. These weren't arbitrary color changes, but precise metaphorical maps for the process of wholeness. The initial blackening phase, for instance, represents confrontation with your shadow material, that uncomfortable encounter with what you've disowned. Yet this darkness contains precisely what you need for completion. Let's return to our documentary subjects and witness this alchemical transformation in their lives. Maya, after integrating her shadow, discovered that her perfectionism transformed into exceptional attention to artistic detail. James found that his denied vulnerability, once integrated, became the foundation for authentic leadership. Sarah's overwhelming sensitivity, once accepted, developed into remarkable empathic abilities with her children. Elena's fear of inadequacy evolved into compassionate teaching methods. Marcus transformed competitive impulses into mentorship skills. What connects these transformations is Jung's profound insight that psychological integration operates like an alchemical process where the most worthless aspects become most valuable. This isn't just metaphorical language, it's a practical pathway toward wholeness. When you stop expending psychological energy fighting aspects of yourself, remarkable things happen. Creativity expands, relationships deepen, purpose clarifies. The most striking benefit emerges in relationships. When you've integrated your shadow aspects, you'll notice an immediate shift in how you perceive others. The qualities you once projected outward, both positive and negative, now become recognized as your own. This creates the possibility for genuine connection based on seeing others as they truly are, rather than as screens for your disowned material. Intimate relationships particularly transform when projection diminishes, allowing authentic encounters rather than unconscious entanglements. This integration directly impacts how we express ourselves in the world. Many discover that their shadow qualities, once integrated, become their most distinctive strengths. The person who struggled with anger finds powerful advocacy skills. The one who battled insecurity develops extraordinary compassion. The perfectionist discovers meticulous attention to meaningful detail. As Jung understood, the alchemical transformation isn't about becoming something new, but revealing what was always there beneath the surface. I want you to consider something revolutionary. What if your greatest weaknesses contain the seeds of your most authentic strengths? What if the very qualities you've worked hardest to hide or eliminate are essential ingredients of your life's purpose? This isn't wishful thinking, but the practical outcome of shadow integration. The alchemical transformation that turns psychological lead into gold. The authentic self emerges, finding purpose through wholeness. This alchemical transformation points to a profound truth about finding your purpose. It's rarely discovered through conventional goal setting or career assessments. What if your authentic calling isn't something you choose, but something that chooses you through the very process of becoming whole? Jung called this lifelong journey of psychological integration individuation, the process through which we gradually become our most authentic selves. Unlike modern approaches that treat purpose as something external to discover or achieve, Jung saw purpose as something that emerges organically when we integrate the fragmented parts of our psyche. Consider how different this is from our culture's typical advice about finding your purpose. We're told to follow our passions, assess our strengths, or pursue what brings us joy. These aren't necessarily wrong approaches, but they often miss something essential: that your true purpose can only emerge when you've reconciled the full spectrum of who you are, including those shadow aspects you've tried to disown. The ultimate aim of individuation, Jung wrote, is to divest oneself of the false wrappings of the persona and move beyond superficial societal expectations to discover one's true self. This is a radical departure from conventional wisdom. Rather than constructing a purpose from external metrics of success, Jung suggested that purpose reveals itself as we shed the masks we wear for others. Look at the footage from our documentary subjects. None of them discovered their authentic direction through traditional goal-setting exercises or by following prescribed career paths. Instead, their clearest sense of purpose emerged precisely at the point where they integrated their most challenging shadow material. What's particularly striking is Jung's observation that fewer than 5% of individuals ever reach mature psychological development. This isn't mentioned to discourage you, but to highlight why so many people feel disconnected from any meaningful sense of purpose. The majority never complete the essential psychological work that allows authentic purpose to emerge. Many people repress creative impulses because they consider them impractical or useless, leading to a life that feels emotionally numb and uninspired. Yet these very impulses, when reclaimed from the shadow, often contain the seeds of our most meaningful contributions. The parts of yourself you've judged as worthless may hold your greatest gifts. Our research reveals something counterintuitive about purpose. It emerges not through relentlessly pursuing external goals, but through understanding your deeper unconscious motivations and integrating repressed aspects of your personality. Your purpose isn't something you invent, it's something you uncover by becoming psychologically whole. This distinction feels entirely different in practice. While pursuing externally defined goals often creates a sense of striving and effort, authentic purpose feels more like allowing your integrated nature to express itself. There's an ease to it, not because it's always simple, but because you're no longer fighting against essential parts of yourself. What makes this approach to purpose so powerful is that it creates not just personal fulfillment, but meaningful contribution to others. When you integrate your shadow aspects, you develop what Jung called hidden genius, a unique combination of insights, abilities, and perspectives that allows you to serve others in ways no one else can. The teacher who integrates her perfectionism doesn't just find personal peace. She develops an innovative approach to helping anxious students. The executive who embraces his vulnerability doesn't just heal his own burnout, He creates a more humane leadership model that transforms his organization. Your hidden genius emerges at precisely the intersection of your wounds and your gifts, the very place where shadow integration occurs. This is why purpose discovered through psychological wholeness feels so different from purpose constructed through conventional planning. It carries a depth, authenticity, and power that manufactured purposes simply cannot match. As we conclude our exploration of Jung's shadow concept, we arrive at perhaps his most revolutionary insight. Jung believed that wholeness, not perfection, represents the ultimate goal of psychological development. This isn't merely a comforting platitude. It fundamentally reshapes how we understand human potential. The shadow journey isn't about eliminating your darkness, but transforming it into creative energy. Those parts of yourself that seem problematic often contain the raw material for your greatest contributions. Jung emphasized that there can be no psychic wholeness without imperfection, suggesting that our flaws aren't obstacles to overcome, but essential elements of our complete selves. Your shadow serves as the guardian of your authentic purpose, protecting your most genuine gifts until you're ready to claim them through self-acceptance. This integration process extends beyond individual psychology into our collective experience, offering a framework for understanding not just personal development, but cultural transformation as well. The light you seek isn't found by escaping your shadow, but by embracing it. In doing so, you discover that what you once feared contains the very essence of who you were always meant to become. See you in the next video.